Hello and welcome to the Nutmeg by the Evening Standard, where we get together and talk about the big talking points from football and the matches we've been to this weekend. I'm Dan Kilpatrick. I'm joined by Jack Rosser, Simon Collins and Malik Ouzia. We're going to start with Spurs, who we seem to start with every week at the moment. They're really struggling under Jose Mourinho, and on Saturday they slipped to a 3-0 defeat at Manchester City, a really insipid performance without much jeopardy, an easy win for record-breaking City, who extended their lead at the top of the table. But a bad afternoon for Spurs, who went behind when Pierre-Emile gave away a penalty for the second time in a few days after he did the same against Everton. There was perhaps a bit of doubt about the decision, Jack, but what does it say when someone as solid as Højbjerg, who has been really solid since he joined from Southampton, what does it say when someone like him starts joining the centre halves in making these costly errors for Tottenham?
I think it doesn't bode well, does it? He sort of sets the standard, or had set the standard for Spurs, you know, when they were playing well with his energy and the way he sort of leads from that role in midfield. He's always been a really vocal player. He's always been someone that gives everything, regardless of, you know, how well he does in doing that. In previous years, he's had the odd sort of rick in him, like he showed against City, but he's been so impressive this season, and Mourinho's relied on him so much that I think it might just be tiredness, really. He's played every minute in the Premier League, I think, and he's played a fair few Europa League games where you wouldn't expect him to play as well, sort of dead rubber ones perhaps, and I think the Antwerp game at home, I'm fairly sure he started that, which I covered and was a bit of a surprise. I think he's really just been, because Mourinho has relied on him so much, and he has played really well, he's just been run into the ground, really, and those mistakes can only sort of be expected, really, if players are tired mentally and physically.
Yeah, I agree. And Hugo Lloris, the Spurs captain, continued his really poor week by making a mistake for the second goal, Gundogan's shot going straight through him. Arguably, he should have done better for the penalty as well from Rodri. He got a hand to it, but couldn't keep it out. And it seems to me that when previously fairly reliable players like Højbjerg and Lloris start making the mistakes that previously have been coming from the likes of Dyer, Davinson Sanchez, Toby Alderweireld, you know, when these players are also kind of crumbling, it's indicative of deeper problems, systemic problems that can only really be pinned down onto Jose Mourinho. Their game at West Ham next weekend does feel like the type of game that would be legitimate to judge Spurs on. West Ham just above them in the table. It's a London derby. I think a game Spurs would expect to win.
Yeah, I was going to raise that as well. I think if you could compare them, West Ham have been a bit tired in their recent games, but if they're well rested in their own form, obviously they've not got any European commitments like Spurs do in the week. So that gives them a clear week after Sheffield United on Monday night to get ready for it. But they've shown so much energy and sort of unity and working for one another, which, you know, there have been the odd mistakes here and there, but not too many. They sort of seem to cover for each other with the way they play and the energy that they show. And I think when you watch Spurs, like you said, losing to City isn't really a big problem. A lot of teams are going to go to Man City and lose this season. Sort of the manner of it, the fact that there didn't really seem to be much energy about Spurs. I mean, Mourinho comes out after every game and praises their effort and their desire, but you can't really see it in the performances.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it was the manner of the defeat. It just felt so insipid, and it didn't really feel like City got out of second gear to me. They didn't feel like a huge amount of jeopardy in the game, really. As soon as City went ahead, I kind of felt watching it that was it, really. And I think the problem for Spurs is it feels like, certainly among the fan base, or at least those on social media, you know, that there's a sense of apathy kind of creeping in, that they're losing in engagement, which is a big worry for the club, particularly if you consider that season tickets will have to be renewed in the next couple of months. So big decisions for Spurs perhaps over Jose Mourinho if they lose to West Ham next weekend. Before that, they play Wolfsberger, a little-known Austrian side in the Europa League, in Budapest, in fact, on Thursday night. That's one of the European games that's been moved to Hungary. Arsenal, another side that have had both their European fixtures coming up in the last 32 of the Europa League against Benfica moved. They got a much more positive result to end a mini slump yesterday beating Leeds 4-2. Simon, do you think Marcelo Bielsa's Leeds were the perfect opponents for Arsenal this weekend?
I think they can be Leeds, particularly if you take them on at their own game. I think if you're ready to go toe to toe and play that sort of expansive style of play by getting the ball down and looking to shift it quickly, then I think they will suit you. And I think that's what Arsenal did, and Bielsa admitted as much afterwards, that they knew what Arsenal wanted to do. They knew that when they saw the Arsenal team with Odegaard, Smith Rowe and Saka all playing in that three off Aubameyang, that Arsenal's plan was going to be to rotate the ball quickly and circulate it around the midfield as fast as they could. And Bielsa said, we couldn't find a way to stop that. And for Arsenal, it was a big result because, we've still got quite a lot of time left in this season simply because we started late. But when you look at this fortnight of games, Benfica twice, you're playing Manchester City, the Premier League leaders, and then Leicester City, another team who are flying this season. It feels very season defining, I think, particularly when you look at those games and you think Arsenal could conceivably, lose 3 or 4 of them. So they needed some momentum going into it. And I think the fact that they played so well, they scored 4 goals, and that young trio behind Aubameyang looked so threatening would have given Arteta a lot of confidence.
Malik, Simon's mentioned the young trio there, Saka, Smith Rowe and Odegaard behind Aubameyang. Was that a glimpse of the future, do you think?
Yeah, I wonder. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Not least because obviously at the moment Odegaard's only definitely there until the end of the season. Pepe's enjoyed a decent little run of late, not to the level that you'd hope for of a £70 million record signing, but encouraging compared to some of his previous performances. I wonder whether, given what happened with him at Ellen Road, whether that came into the team selection at all in terms of him missing that one out. There's the Europa League game coming in the week that maybe he looks a bit more suited to. But in terms of what we did see yesterday, it was exciting. It was good to see that rotation because I think particularly with Tierney out of the side lately, a lot of what Arsenal have done as well has been restricted really to Saka on that right flank. So having the 3 players who are quite fluid, different players pop up on the left, pop up on the right, did work really nicely. And as you've already said, brought the best out of Aubameyang, which, as we saw at the end of last season, is basically the only way Arsenal can be competitive and successful at the moment with the players they've got, is for him to score most of their goals and lead from the front.
Simon, you mentioned the sort of run of games they've got coming up. You wonder whether, obviously, that sort of the attacking approach they took yesterday works against Leeds because they're such an open side that if you get it right, they leave so many gaps that you can exploit. You wonder you can't really play that same team against City and to an extent Leicester. But given where they are in the table and how tight it is going forward, do you think that's the sort of team that he'll use for the Benfica games, try and attack them and maybe prioritise the Europa League over anything else this season?
Yeah, I think for me, I think the Europa League is the slight priority over the Premier League. The only benefit with the Premier League, I think, this season is the fact that we've seen, because everyone can beat everyone and the fixtures are so congested, if you win sort of 3 games, you can be right up there. If Arsenal had beaten Wolves and Villa the other week, which they were close games, they'd have been level on points with Liverpool. So they won't want to, give up on the Premier League, but the Europa League for me feels like the best chance they're going to have to get in the Champions League. And the best thing I think Arteta's got now is that he's got options and he's got different systems and ways he can play. I think when we were speaking, in December time during that miserable run, you didn't really see where the light at the end of the tunnel was or the different options he could play. But now you can see, you can bring in Pepe, who's a very different type of player to a Smith Rowe and Odegaard. You can move Aubameyang to the left and play Lacazette through the middle to hold the ball up. I think with Benfica, it will be, for me, I think it's going to be about trying to get as much pace in that forward line. I think they've been playing Vertonghen and Otamendi as the centre-backs this season, who we obviously all know very well from the Premier League. And I think for Arsenal, wouldn't surprise me if you see someone like Pepe come into that game simply because he's got that sort of pace that can terrify defence. And I think resting him at the weekend and bringing him back in for that might well be a good solution for me.
Before we go on to Palace and Brentford, let's answer some questions about the North London sides. Simon, sticking with Arsenal, you've been asked, what are the chances of the club signing Odegaard in a permanent deal?
It's going to be an interesting one. That it's early days, obviously, but the positive signs have been seen. I think certainly with his performance at the weekend for Odegaard. He came to Arsenal because he wanted to play games and he wants to play as a number 10. And Arteta has, immediately given him that. He's worked out a way to have him and Smith Rowe in the team. I think a lot of fans were worried that Odegaard's arrival meant, this could dent the progress of Smith Rowe, but they can clearly play together. I think we'll have to watch his progress and see how it goes. And also, it'll be interesting to see what happens at Real Madrid. We know Zidane isn't a huge fan of Odegaard, but if Zidane isn't there in the summer, a new manager comes in, he might want to keep Odegaard. But there's also something to consider is the financial market and COVID's impact, because Real Madrid, like Barcelona, do not have a lot of money at the moment. And if they need to raise funds and if they need to get some money into the club, selling Odegaard after a good 6 months at Arsenal is an easy way to raise money. So it could work out as a deal that works well for all parties, particularly if Odegaard performs well at Arsenal over these 6 months.
Yeah, and I've got a question on Spurs, which is simply, should Hugo Lloris be dropped? Obviously, Lloris certainly at fault for one goal against City, certainly at fault for one goal against Everton, but generally I think has gone off a cliff in 2021 form-wise. To answer the question, no, I think no at the moment, because Spurs' understudy is Joe Hart, who's shown kind of nothing in his brief appearances to suggest that he's kind of set to roll back the years and prove an able deputy. I think the key thing for Spurs is to find an heir to Lloris. It's a long overdue signing they need to make. They need to add some competition for him or an outright replacement for him. The only person who's kind of come close to looking like they could genuinely challenge Lloris to replace him in the last few years is Paulo Gazzaniga, the season before last, and now he's left the club to go on loan to Elche. So thin pickings in terms of competition for Lloris. So I think at the moment, given that he's club captain and he does have an influence on and off the field, I think he has to stay in. I don't think Mourinho's got much choice there. Let's move on to Crystal Palace, who seem to be going nowhere fast after a 3-0 home defeat to Burnley on Saturday. Again, without Wilfried Zaha, they really suffered. Jack, the ghost of Frank de Boer is never far away. He's always kind of lingering at Selhurst Park, I guess. But do you think they need a fresh start, perhaps under a new manager, maybe in the summer or perhaps sooner?
It's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because you look at them and what Roy Hodgson brings is safety almost guaranteed every season. They're 11 points clear now. They're treading water completely, but their decent start to the season means they're 11 points clear. If they'd won against Burnley, they would have had the biggest points tally at any point of this stage in a Premier League season for Crystal Palace. So it's a hard dilemma, but it's just become so difficult to watch and enjoy and sort of see any sort of progress. So it seems like a natural time. His contract's up. There's more than 10 senior players out of contract at the end of the season as well. And there's a huge amount of work to be done on regenerating that squad. It began last summer with Ferguson, who we still haven't seen because he's been injured. Eze as well. Riedewald's come in and made a number of appearances. But they face a big question over what they want to be, because safety is huge for Crystal Palace. It can't be underestimated how important just staying in the league is. They want to spend so much money. They're spending 100 million on their stadium. They're spending millions and millions, tens of millions on their academy. So they need the money to keep coming in. But it is, like you said, the ghost of Frank de Boer is still lingering. I think I've mentioned on here before that maybe a year ago, someone inside the club said they wanted a sexy foreign manager to replace Roy. And you wonder whether that's the route to go down. There are plenty of options out there. But yeah, I think it's a natural time to sort of build on this squad, bring some new faces in and play some, with the options that are there. If they can keep hold of Zaha, they've got Eze. Riedewald's exciting enough on the ball, needs a bit more support around him. There's the sort of makings of an exciting squad there. And while Roy guarantees safety, he's not perhaps the one to get the best out of them.
Jack, do you think from a fan's point of view, they've got to a point now where it's a risk they're happy to take? I mean, we've been hearing the kind of warnings about Roy, you don't know what you got till it's gone kind of thing. And you look at teams like Stoke, maybe, who got so used to being a solid Premier League team and then tried to shoot a little bit higher and ended up backfiring. Do you think that the fans have just kind of got to a point where the football is, as you say, so boring that it's a risk they're willing to take?
Yeah, I think that's the sort of general feeling around the club. I mean, they've got Brighton, obviously their rivals, up next, and they're quite a good case study to balance them against, because obviously they made the surprise decision to sack Chris Hughton, who had got them into the Premier League and made them stable, and then they just immediately went for Graham Potter, the more sort of attractive and progressive manager. And it's, you know, they don't score bags of goals, Brighton, but their form recently has been fantastic, so it is starting to work.
Eddie Howe being out of work and Swansea boss Steve Cooper are among the names who could perhaps be attractive options for Palace if they did decide to get rid of Roy and go for a slightly more progressive manager. But Malik, what about Brentford's Thomas Frank? They were on an incredible 21-game unbeaten run until this weekend when they were beaten 2-0 by Barnsley. They're back challenging at the right end of the Championship despite selling a couple of their best players in the summer, and Ben Rama and Ollie Watkins. So how good a job has Frank done? And do you think if Brentford don't go up this year, he deserves a crack at the Premier League?
I think it's certainly a question that will be asked, and I suppose it's strange in a way that it wasn't at the end of last season, because they won a lot of plaudits last season for the way they were playing, for the improvements in players like Watkins and Ben Rama, but it never seemed up for debate whether Thomas Frank would still be there at the start of this season. But of course, I think that will be a question, as I say, at the end of this campaign. In terms of the job that he's done this year, I'm still not convinced they're a better side than they were last year when you take those two players out of it, and Christian Norgard, who was maybe their sort of unsung hero last year in centre midfield, who has barely played this season because of injury. But they do look a more experienced team, a more canny team. It obviously helps when you replace the goals of Watkins as well as they have done with Ivan Toney, who is also the top assist maker in the league. And Josh Da Silva's really stepped up, a player that obviously was at Arsenal, had bags of potential, was a good player for them last season, but has now emerged as one of the real leaders in the side. I think it'll be disappointing if they don't go up this year. The run that they've just been on, 21 games unbeaten is remarkable in any season, in any league, let alone in this season in the Championship. So provided that defeat at the weekend, which was a strange one, doesn't leave a lasting mark, then you'd hope that they can kick on, obviously starting with the derby against QPR in midweek.
Yeah, you mentioned Ivan Toney there, and everyone always says about Brentford that they're one of the best run clubs in the country and that their recruitment is just consistently impressive and spot on. But beyond that, what's been the sort of secret to their success of that run?
I think the League Cup run actually played a big part in it, just in terms of building a bit of confidence at the start of the season. They obviously lost the playoff final last year, lost a couple of their best players, had a very short pre-season, even by the standards of this season. And they didn't start particularly quickly in the league, which was the same thing that ultimately cost them last year. They had a bit of a slow start and ended up missing out on automatic promotion by a couple of points. So when things weren't going brilliantly in the league at the start of the year, I think that run where they knocked out 4 Premier League teams in the EFL Cup did just boost a bit of confidence, get a bit of momentum going. And obviously since October, they've not really stopped rolling. They've just, as I say, kept on going. Ivan Toney was scoring all the goals at the start of that run, and actually in recent weeks, more players have started chipping in with more and more goals. Simon Godos has taken a while to get running, but he's chipped in with a few. Sergi Canos, Brian Mbuemo coming back into the team. So it bodes well for the second half of the season.
Yeah, and Brentford got a big London derby against QPR midweek to hopefully bounce back from that surprise defeat to Barnsley. Also, of course, Chelsea and West Ham, who we haven't talked about today, are in action tonight. Chelsea at home to struggling Newcastle, West Ham at home to struggling Sheffield United. So both those sides will be hoping to pick up 3 points and increase the pressure on the top 4. That's it from us for now. We'll be back next Monday to discuss all next weekend's action. But thanks to Simon, Malik and Jack in the meantime, and thank you for watching.